How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. Today we're talking about two infielders, Gleyber, Torres, and Oswald Peraza, their roles and kind of what their value is right now. The last couple weeks have been interesting, to say the least, for the Yankees. A lot of ups and downs. They won 3 of their last 4 games, and they lost a heartbreaker yesterday to the Tampa Bay Rays. And Torres, after a really hot start to the 2023 season, has seen his numbers fall off a cliff. We're going to discuss that. Torres has always been kind of known as a streaky hitter. He's been inconsistent in that category, but that hot start definitely gave us some insight and some optimism into what this season could be for him. But now that his numbers are starting to level off and they're dropping really fast, I want to have a conversation about it. And I also want to have a conversation about Oswald Peraza. And Ryan, I know for a fact you do not like it when the Yankees call up players and then sit them on the bench. They should be playing every day. You're wasting service time. You're kind of just wasting these players away. I know Peraza did have that little ankle sprain he suffered last week, but at the end of the day, he's been available off the bench and he's been able to play. They just haven't been utilizing him. So what's the reason there? What's going on? What is his value right now for the Yankees? What do we see happening with these two players? I think it's a good conversation to have right now because of Gleyber's recent struggles and also Peraza's lack of usage. So Ryan, before we dive into these two interesting players and what the future holds for them, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Look, the Yankees obviously are coming off of a brutal loss, and whenever you come off of a loss like that, it's kind of hard to, talk. It's kind of hard to not feel like you want to just shake something up, right? This team's treading 500. They've kind of just been over the last couple of weeks, and that's obviously discouraging and disheartening. And if you're Oswald Peraza, not that he's necessarily tore it up or he's hit particularly well, but he is a top prospect, right? The Yankees did value him to the point where, they anointed him the shortstop at points in time during the postseason last year. They heralded him for his defense. There were legitimate conversations that Volpe would end up never playing shortstop for the Yankees and just permanently play second base because of the existence of Peraza. So it's befuddling. It's weird that he doesn't play. I'm not saying that, Willie Calhoun's been good over the last week and a half. He deserves to keep playing. Don't get me wrong. But it just doesn't feel like the right move to keep Peraza up and not let him develop more in AAA. Look, if he puts up really good AAA numbers, even if you don't utilize him, right, he's now a trade piece. And it kind of feels like you're taking his value, right? What exactly has he shown in AAA? I mean, he's kind of been a league average here. I believe his WRC plus is around 100 at the AAA level. If you're a team, you're looking at a guy who's been league average in AAA, is probably going to get worse in Major League Baseball. That makes sense, right? If you're not great in AAA, you're probably not going to be great in Major League Baseball without massive adjustments. That's what, if I'm from the outside perspective, if I'm, a team that's rebuilding and looking to sell off pieces, that's what I see in Peraza. I see a guy who's probably a 90 to 95 WRC plus hitter with really good defense, right? Is that a bad player? No, but is that the type of player you put a package around? I'm not necessarily sure, right? And that's kind of the conversation we have to have, and it's a brutal conversation, but, if Peraza doesn't hit, how valuable is he to another organization, right? And I know he's a utility infielder. I know he has the defensive skill set to adapt to other positions very quickly. But again, let him develop in AAA or let him just play up in the major leagues, right? They can't go halfway with him, and they've gone halfway with him since September of last year where, they call him up, he's hitting well, and they just refuse to give him the starting job at shortstop. This team is treating him like crap, right? And I've always been one of those guys with Clint Frazier, Miguel Andujar, where I always push back on the notion the Yankees didn't give them a fair shot. I think those guys just got hurt and didn't play well when they did get healthy. And I think that's what happened to them, right? Or even, the Chance Adams of the world or other prospects of that nature. I don't think the Yankees let guys rot in AAA per se, but in Peraza's case, it feels like that, right? It feels like those complaints that people had about previous prospects are now validated with Peraza. It's a stupid decision. I don't think it's explainable. I don't think it makes sense. I think it's downright stupid, right? If you don't have the infield depth that you have to use one of your top prospects as, a part-time player, that's on you, right? I've said this before with calling up Chaparro or Dunham, right? Ruining the development of a prospect in your system because you're poorly equipped to handle injuries at the major league level is on the fault of the general manager, right? That's on the fault of Brian Cashman. It shouldn't be the fault of Oswald Peraza. It shouldn't be the fault of Elijah Dunham, Andre Chaparro, any prospect you want to mention. Are there guys who are, making it hard to keep them in AAA? Absolutely. But is it fair to call a guy up and not play him? It's not, right? So end of the day, I think you can agree with me here. they have to figure out what they want to do with Peraza. They can't go halfway with him. They're going to tank his value. Teams are going to be less inclined to trade for him, and it's going to be hard for them to put together a deal with Peraza and get a real impact player back. You don't want to sell short on him. You don't want to trade him for a rental. But in the same vein, I don't know how much value you're going to get for him in a big time trade. He's not a frontline guy for any of the top outfielders or pitchers in the market. So I really wonder what they're doing here. You have to commit to a plan with him.
Yeah, I mean, look, Peraza's value right now to me screams trade bait. I just can't put my finger on the pulse here about what they're really going to do with Peraza because, Gleyber Torres is starting most days at second base. That's their primary starter right now. And to discuss his statistics, they're not very good over the past couple of weeks, right? So Torres started off on fire. If you guys recall, he was one of our best hitters. He was one of the guys that was consistently kind of providing, that actual value the Yankees needed in the batting order. But, you look at what he's done recently, and he's hitting 242 with a 338 OBP, and by the Yankees standards, that's not good enough. But by context, within what the team has to offer right now, that's actually better than what we've had. So you kind of look at it as a two-faced thing and you say, okay, what exactly do the Yankees do with him here on out? What exactly is his value? Is he a trade piece or is he a long-term solution? Signed a 1-year, $10 million deal to avoid arbitration. But now we have to ask ourselves, is Gleyber Torres more of a trade piece than Oswald Peraza? Is Oswald Peraza the solution at second base moving forward? He's struggled, in his own right, obviously, to start this season, hitting 188 with a 316 OBP. Obviously, I think he will get better with more opportunity. But the problem is, like Ryan, you said, he's not getting the opportunity. If you're not going to call him up, and if you're going to call him up and you're not going to play him, why the hell is he up? Why the hell is he here? The only logic I can say is two things. One, he's hurt. Or two, they want to keep him healthy by not playing him. And, calling him up and just sitting him on the bench is the best way to keep him healthy. And, they put him in the other day and he immediately hurts his ankle. And they're like, oh my God, what's going on here? What do you think kind of the sequence of events is right now in terms of, do you see Torres or Peraza as more valuable as a trade piece? Because, Cashman said a couple days ago, essentially, if they're going to trade, they're going to trade from a point of strength, and that point of strength is their infield. IKF has no value, guys. If you're going to drop IKF in the comments, he doesn't have any value. He's one of the worst hitters in baseball right now. He has a sub 40 WRC plus. His outfield, he can't play left field. He obviously had that big mistake a couple days ago. He's inconsistent. Center field, he's a fine defensive player, but again, the offensive qualities simply are not there. He's not an everyday starter for a team. He's a supplementary piece at best. So are you seeing this as like Peraza or Torres has to be the ones traded? And if so, who has the most value right now?
Yeah, one of the big things that you mentioned there with Peraza and Torres is kind of like making the choice, right? And as I mentioned earlier, Peraza hasn't necessarily established himself as an offensive player yet. And on a team with a lot of defense-first guys, is Peraza the best fit for this team at second base long-term? And is Gleyber Torres going to warrant an extension, right? Those are two questions that I think are very fair to ask, right? You already have, I'm assuming that, not that Bader is here long-term, but I'm assuming he's factored into the equation, that they're thinking about his role here long term. Obviously, Trevino and Higashioka are under contract for past 2023. I believe Trevino's under contract past 2025. You have a defense first guy there. You have a defense first guy in center field. Left field is still a black hole. There's no immediate answer there. I know Jason Dominguez is one of the top guys and one of the best prospects in baseball, but he's still a question mark and he's still some time away. Do you want to have a defense first guy at second base, right? Like that feels like a position, not that defense doesn't matter, but it's not a position like shortstop, center field, or catcher, where being defense first can mean that you can be an all-star caliber player without necessarily hitting, at the rate of other better offensive players at your position. The Yankees don't have a lot of offense already right now. Can they make that sacrifice? I don't know, right? As you mentioned, Gleyber Torres, like what's his trade value? He's a guy on, with 1.5 years of control at the deadline. Peraza has much more control in terms of contractual control, and I think he has a higher floor and ceiling just based on the fact that he's such a good defensive shortstop, or he's graded out to be such a good defensive shortstop. So there are legitimate questions to be had here, right? Like, what do you do with Peraza? What do you do with Torres? Who's more valuable? I think Peraza is more valuable just from the service time standpoint. He's getting paid less. You can option him. There are so many different things that make him more valuable, whereas Gleyber Torres doesn't possess that. But in the same vein, who's more impactful for this team right now and at least least for this year, and I think even next year, I'd say it's Gleyber Torres, right? Unless the Yankees have a makeover offensively, they have a defense first guy catcher. They don't have a left fielder, and their center fielder is a defense first guy in Bader. But maybe he starts hitting the way he's hit in the postseason and in the regular season, and maybe that's a different story. But this team needs bats, right? This team's a young team or has young players at certain positions that are still finding their way. Anthony Volpe is one of them. How much longer do you have, of LeMahieu being a productive hitter? You only have another year of Rizzo after this year. So some of your big bats, some of your big boppers are not going to be around, right? Or not going to be at their prime anymore. So I think Torres is just a better fit right now. It's just a matter of what you can get for Oswald Peraza, which still remains to be seen. We still don't know who's exactly tanking, who's going to sell, who's going to buy. There are some bubble teams still there, some young, exciting teams. So that's something I think we can evaluate a lot closer at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so here's the argument, though. Peraza, I would love for him to start hitting really well and showing more consistency offensively. Defensively, we know he can be a stud, but I prefer Peraza to be a long-term solution at second base over Gleyber Torres because of the control factor and because of the price factor. The Yankees need the money they can spare next year to go out and get somebody, whether it's one of the top Japanese players that we were kind of talking about yesterday off the podcast, which we really want to discuss with you guys at some point. But I actually would like Peraza to be that long-term guy at second base because you keep the price down. Torres is going to get a nice deal. He's going to get $16-17 million per season most likely. And the inconsistencies have been hard to shake off at times. You know what I mean? Like, Gleyber, I prefer, baseball's a game of ebbs and flows. You can never have a guy that's always good, but Torres will go on like a streak where he's really hot for 2 weeks, boost his numbers insanely, and then he'll go a month straight without like hitting at all. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing with Gleyber is like he'll have those short bursts of quality. And you're like, wow, like that's the Gleyber we love. That's the Gleyber we want to see. And then it's like a month of just like, oh my God, like he doesn't look confident. He's popping up all the time. His head's hanging. You're not getting the body language that you'd see to shake off those bad at bats, come back. In the month of May, he's been pretty bad. His numbers aren't great. Now his runners with scoring position are tremendous. Like he's been doing well with runners in scoring position, but when there's no men on base, he's not hitting well. So I guess like I'm a little bit concerned that the inconsistencies end up coming at the worst times. You know what I mean? Like when the Yankees need him to be performing well, like when the Yankees are on a cold streak like they were the past couple weeks, he's ice cold. Like the postseason comes around, like sometimes he's ice cold. Like sometimes he's really good. You just don't know what version of Gleyber Torres you're going to get. And if we're going to roll with a streaky player, you might as well go with the young one that doesn't have any service time accumulated and is going to be dirt cheap over the next 4, 5, 6 years. Does that logic make sense to you? Because like, I feel like if you're going to go with inconsistency, you might as well go with the cheaper one.
Yeah, one of the big things you mentioned there is just kind of like the up and down nature of Gleyber Torres. Like he starts off the year, he has a 90 average exit velocity, he's barreling the ball a ton. And over his last few games, he's not hitting the ball hard. He's got a hard hit rate now under 30%. And last year, that was one of the things he did really well, right? He figured out his swing, he started hitting for power. And now this year, that's gone away. And it's weird because Gleyber Torres kind of has just done that year to year. He's just a different type of hitter, right? I don't know if you remember, but in 2021 and 2020, he was walking a lot and he wasn't striking out a lot, but he sucked at the plate because he wasn't hitting for much power. So it's one of those situations where, like, what is Gleyber Torres offensively? Like, is he a patient hitter? Is he an aggressive hitter? Is he a power hitter? Is he a contact hitter? Like, he has to stick with one approach and just stay with it, right? He's gonna slump. That's going to happen. It's baseball. But he can't go out there and keep trying to tweak things and in season and try to change things left and right. That's how you end up, as you mentioned, as a consistent ball player. This dude's ridiculously talented. He's a good hitter. Like, he's struggling, and we're talking about his struggles. He has a 110 WRC plus still, right? He's still, I believe, walking more than he strikes out, right? Like, those are tangible skills that he has, but, you're not going to have a high BABIP if you're hitting the ball 87.1 miles an hour on average. Those are easy to field batted balls. He's not a burner on the base paths. I know he's an aggressive base runner, but he doesn't have Anthony Volpe speed. I'm pretty sure he's around league average, if not a little bit worse than league average in terms of sprint speed. So, he can't afford to try to beat out a ground ball to the third baseman. He's got to try to live, get a ball in the gap, hit a ball into the seats, use his raw power, and go out and hit the ball hard, right? That's where the money is for Gleyber Torres. And as you mentioned, if he's going to continue to be inconsistent, the Yankees are going to look for other options, right? You know, even if they don't want to go with Peraza long term at second base, you can always look at free agency. There's always infielders available who can hit a little bit and don't cost too much. They could stopgap themselves a little bit there. You know, they have guys like Trey Sweeney in the farm who are, you know, developing young infielders. Alexander Vargas is another guy who's kind of flown under the radar. He had a really down year in 2022. He was one of these international prospects they signed that had a high ceiling. And this year in high A, alongside Spencer Jones, he's been excellent, right? I'm trying to think of other guys off the top of my head. There's Jared Serna as well, who's like, I believe he's also 20 years old, but I believe he's in low A with the Tampa Tarpons, and he's unbelievable in terms of his contact skills. So it's not like they don't have infield prospects, and it doesn't have to be Peraza, it doesn't have to be Torres, it could be someone year down the line, and they can always look externally for options. You know, no one expected the Yankees to acquire Josh Donaldson. They just did. No one expected Gio Urshela to come out of nowhere. He just did. I don't even think anyone realistically expected us to be in a situation where, you know, when we initially signed DJ LeMahieu, that he would be a long-term piece, and he was. So, you know, there's a lot that still has to unfold for these two guys and their future and what they do. But if they can perform, we won't have to hopefully have conversations about other guys outside the organization. But the way it's trending right now, it looks like their best bet is just kind of stopgapping it and not committing to either guy long term.
That's interesting. Like, I think that's a really interesting take. And, you know, right now the Yankees have the leverage of that value. Both Gleyber and Oswald Peraza have value. The question is, what position do they see as their biggest weakness? You know what I mean? You get Bader back and he's been ridiculous. Judge, obviously, ridiculous. Left field's a huge hole. Like, it's just a freaking hole. It's an abyss. You know, Cabrera has been struggling offensively. He had his best game of the season yesterday, which still wasn't like great. He went 2 for 4. The fact that he went 2 for 4 and had like 2 singles is like, you know, was it singles? I don't even know if he had any extra base hits. He might have had a double, but you know, obviously you want to see more consistency from him. Prior to yesterday's game, I think, had 1 hit in his previous 6 games. So the cold streak has certainly been prevalent for Oswaldo. There's a good argument to make that he should be sent to AAA just to get his confidence back and then get called up, you know, more of as like a tactical move instead of like a long-term move. But I do still see his value certainly prominent as a super utility guy. But I will say this, you know, is it left field, you know, that needs the most help, or is it a starting pitcher? Do the Yankees feel confident that Rodon's going to come back from this chronic back issue and actually recover? Do they feel as though Severino can be relied upon? Frankie Montas is basically toast. Johnny Brito needs to go back to AAA and keep building his game out and refining some of those pitches. Or maybe he got sent to the bullpen where the bullpen's been excellent for the most part. You know, we can't trust Clark Schmidt. He's going to be a bullpen piece when some of these guys return. Domingo Germán is like fine. You know, he's an average supplement, has good games, has bad games. What do you see as the most, like, as our weakest link at this point in time? Is it left field or is it a starting pitching slot?
You know, I think it's actually starting pitching, right? I think the Yankees can piece together their outfield. I think they can survive, right? You know, obviously, if you asked me a week ago, I'd feel differently, but now they have Harrison Bader back, so that kind of changes things, right? Bader and Judge are 2 pretty good outfielders, so having a third, like, kind of meh outfield, you just play the hot hand, isn't the worst case in the world. I think their infield's pretty complete. You know, Volpe, again, Torres hasn't been terrible. He's just slumping lately. LeMahieu's been pretty good. Rizzo's had his inconsistencies, but, you know, for the most part, his numbers on the year are pretty good. And, of course, you know what, you're getting in Trevino and Higashioka, and I'm not going to ever, like, complain about their offense unless it's unplayably bad. You know, Stanton's coming back into the equation at some point. I know he's doing baseball activities, so I anticipate that he's not having a setback right now. That could also change, but I think it's starting pitching, right? Johnny Brito isn't putting up competitive starts anymore, right? And that's an issue. Clark Schmidt is competitive in small sample sizes, but, you know, that burns your bullpen, right? So, like, for example, you could say that guys not being able to go deep into games is why the Yankees lost yesterday, right? Had the Yankees had an Ian Hamilton and Ron Marinaccio available, I imagine Aaron Boone sitting back and saying, all right, I got a full bullpen. I'm not gonna push Garrett Cole here. You know, Aaron Boone was put in a situation where, and at first I really hated the decision to leave Cole in, but when you kind of sit back and think about it, shortened bullpen, Ian Hamilton's been one of your best relievers. He's not available. They're using Michael King in shorter spurts, not 2 innings. They're trying to keep him a 1 inning guy so they can have him more available. Clay Holmes is still a question mark for all things considered, right? If they threw in Clay Holmes with a time run coming up, I don't think the reaction would have been much better. And Garrett Cole's your ace. He wanted to live and die by his ace. He died by his ace. I'm not going to kill him for it. But, the starting pitching staff not being able to go deep into games means you don't have your top relievers around as much as you'd like to have them around. And I think that's a real weak link for this team. Rodon, we don't know when he's coming back. Not knowing when Rodon coming back changes everything, because that means even when Severino returns, you have still both Schmidt and Herman in the rotation. And as you mentioned, Herman's not a problem in the rotation. Off the field issues aside for a second here, I've made it very clear how I feel about him as a person. But as a pitcher, he's solid, and solid is better than 99% of your options in the 4 or 5 spot usually, right? If he's your 5 pitcher, you have a pretty good rotation. It's a matter of just finding someone who can reliably pitch day in and day out and give you good results and just give you a chance to win. Brito's no longer doing that for you. He needs to develop some sort of breaking ball. I think that's something that can happen in AAA, where you can tinker around a little bit more, and it's not as important for him to get results in AAA as it is in the major league level. And then Clark Schmidt, you move him to the bullpen, and not only do you feel like you're getting a better outing out of your starting pitchers if you acquire one, but now you get better in the bullpen, right? Yesterday again, is Albert Abreu, I've made it clear, I don't dislike Albert Abreu. I think he's a solid pitcher. I think he's talented. He's just not the guy you want up as your first guy out in extra innings, right? Clark Schmidt, that was his role last year, and he was pretty good at it. Games in Baltimore, I remember that he did pretty well in that role. They were out, the big outing that I remember is the one against Chicago, where that went into the 12th inning, and he pitched 3 innings in relief in extra innings and held the Chicago Cubs scoreless, right? That is Clark Schmidt's lane. That used to be his lane. He used to be very good at it. So I think you can agree with me here. Not having that has kind of made the Yankee bullpen a little fragile at times, right? They're injured, right? No Canley, no Trevino, no Loizaga. You're not going to have Trevino all year. You're not going to have Loizaga until the late summer, and Canley is still working his way back. So we're in a spot where getting a starting pitcher would just change the landscape of this pitching staff. You add Severino in there, and you're able to add a starting pitcher. Even if Montas doesn't return fully as a starter, I know he's supposed to be starting his throwing program soon, but you could throw him into the bullpen as well. I think the pitching depth is really thinned out right now, and it's showing in the exhaustion in the bullpen and their inability to win these close games that they would win last year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And ultimately the starting pitching, it sucks because we've invested so much in it. Cashman has went out and put $162 million in a player who now has chronic back issues. And for a pitcher, that's hard to deal with. The cortisone shots. How many shots is he going to need to get through 6 years? That's looking like one of the worst deals. And you know what? Last year we have this same conversation every single freaking year. It's like, Jacoby Ellsbury was the worst deal that we could have made. This guy was the worst deal. Acquiring this player, Montas, Joey Gallo, the worst deal. And then Cashman tops it all off with $162 million for 6 years for an injury-prone player. And look, at the time, we were very excited, right? Because the prospect of having Rodon is ridiculously awesome. Having a 1-2 punch with Gary Cole and Carlos Rodon is objectively sick to consider, but we're not the ones evaluating his health, right? We're just reacting to the fact that we assume the Yankees have done their due diligence and know what they're buying, know what they're getting. We don't know. We react to the ridiculous numbers he put together the last 2 seasons and why we're really excited, but we're not the medical staff failing to determine that Montas is already injured when you got him. Right? We're not the guys, figuring out that Carlos Rodon has back injuries ready to ruin his season before he even gets started. You know what I mean? These are things that are for the professionals that they hire, the medical staff, the guys who are doing these actual health evaluations. And now we're kind of asking ourselves, what is wrong with their process? You know what I mean? Why do we have to continue trading valuable players to fix positions we thought we already fixed, right? Montas, Severino, and Rodon, we were supposed to have one of the best starting rotations in the game. One of the best in the game. And now we're already talking about trading Gleyber Torres, who we all love, Oswald Peraza, who we thought was our starting shortstop a month and a half ago. And we're talking about trading them for starting pitchers already. Left field, we thought that we had that position locked down. There was no way that, Oswaldo and Hicks and all the players we had available there were all going to go bust, right? We thought that one of them would emerge as a good player. I didn't think that they would get rid of Rafael Ortega. I would have preferred for them to keep him. I think, Ryan, you were on the same boat as I was on that. At least keep him around in the AAA. He wanted to go to free agency. I don't even know where he's at now. I think he's a AAA in Texas or something. So, it's unfortunate to see the Yankees, kind of crumble, and it's at their own demise. They've done this to themselves. It's not even random things have happened. Expected things have happened. Injuries to injury-prone players. These are things that you can project. These are things you can estimate. And the fact that, Cashman insists we are still a World Series caliber team, let me ask you this. When's the last time we've been to a World Series? He's been saying this for over a decade that we're a World Series caliber team, but we haven't been to one in over 10 years. So by my account, we're not a World Series caliber team. We pay enough to be a World Series caliber team, but the evaluation process and the structure of the moves that we make do not indicate that we are capable of that. And that leads to front office management. That leads to decision making at the highest level. That is not at all because of the players, because the players we are getting, they know that they get hurt. They know that they aren't reliable at times, but we invest in those players anyway. And now we're talking about trading two really, really fun, awesome players that we love because we have to correct the mistakes that front office personnel continue to make. And that is unfortunate. That is a really unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in right now. So guys, I'd love to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments, as always, upon the matter of Gleyber Torres and Oswald Peraza. It's really unfortunate, but we will manage. We'll figure it out. I'm always happy to hear your perspectives. Have a good conversation below in the comments. And as always, make sure to drop a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you are so kind. We appreciate that very, very much. And we have a big 3-game series against the worst team in baseball, or arguably the worst team in baseball, the Oakland Athletics. We need to sweep this series. We need to take these 3 games and then go back and face off against Tampa and win that series too. We have a chance to get back in the win column. We have a chance to get some momentum. This is the time to do it. And as always, my friends, we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.